Have you ever prayed for something and then felt like nothing happened? Maybe you've asked God for guidance, for healing, or for a breakthrough, but days, weeks, or even months have passed and you're still waiting. If that's you, I have one question. Could it be that you're making one of these 5 common mistakes after praying? Many people think that prayer is just about asking and waiting, but what you do after you pray is just as important as the prayer itself. The Bible gives us clear guidance on how to remain in faith, trust God's timing, and position ourselves to receive His answers. But unfortunately, many people unknowingly sabotage their own prayers, whether by doubting, complaining, or giving up too soon. In this study, we're going to uncover the 5 mistakes you should never make after praying. We'll explore the spiritual principles behind them, look at powerful biblical examples, and learn how to stay in faith while waiting for God's answer. What you're about to discover could change the way you pray forever. But before we begin, let me ask you something. Are you subscribed to this channel? Many people watch our videos but never subscribe, and by doing so, they miss out on powerful biblical teachings that could strengthen their faith. So take a moment, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future lessons. Now let's dive in. These mistakes are more common than you think, and avoiding them could be the key to unlocking your next answered prayer. One of the biggest mistakes a person can make after praying is doubting whether God has heard them or will answer. It's a natural human tendency to question things, especially when we don't see immediate results. But here's the truth. God always hears prayer. 1 John 5:14 assures us, "This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to His will, He hears us." The issue is not whether God listens, but whether we trust Him enough to wait for His answer. Doubt sneaks in when we expect an immediate response. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is instant, but God doesn't operate on human timelines. Just because you don't see something happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Consider Daniel 10:12-13, where Daniel's prayer was heard immediately, but the answer was delayed because of spiritual warfare. Sometimes God's response is held up for reasons beyond what we can see, but that doesn't mean He has forgotten. Another reason doubt creeps in is because we try to predict how God will answer. We assume He will respond in a particular way, and when things don't go as expected, we question whether He has responded at all. But Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Trusting in God means accepting that His ways are higher. His timing is perfect, and His plans are always better than ours. Doubt also robs us of peace. When we pray, we are supposed to leave our burdens with God, not carry them with us in worry. Philippians 4:6-7 tells us to not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. When we continue to worry and question, we are essentially saying that we don't believe God is capable or willing to take care of our needs. That's a dangerous mindset that weakens faith. The key to overcoming doubt after prayer is to stand firm in faith. Instead of focusing on what hasn't happened yet, focus on what God has already done. Remember the times He has answered prayers before. Declare His promises over your life. When doubt knocks, answer with faith. And instead of asking, "Did God hear me?" start declaring, "God is already working on my behalf." But doubting God's answer is just one mistake. Another common error is praying and then doing nothing, expecting God to do everything while we wait passively. But is that really how faith works? That's what we'll explore next. One of the biggest misconceptions about prayer is believing that once we've prayed, all we have to do is sit back and wait for God to do everything. While faith requires trust, it also requires action. Many people pray for change but make no effort to align themselves with the answer they're asking for. The truth is, prayer is not a substitute for action, it is a catalyst for it. James 2:17 reminds us, "Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." If we truly believe in what we've prayed for, our actions should reflect that belief. Consider someone who prays for a new job but never submits an application, or a person who asks God for financial provision but continues to make poor financial decisions. While God can perform miracles, He often works through our obedience and effort. Proverbs 16:3 tells us, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." Notice that it says God blesses our steps, but we have to take them. Another mistake is waiting for the perfect moment. Some people pray for guidance but refuse to move forward until they receive a sign so clear that it eliminates all risk. But faith doesn't work that way. Ecclesiastes 11:4 warns us, "Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap." If we wait for ideal conditions, we'll never make a move. Many times God has already given the answer, but it's up to us to take the first step in faith. There's also a danger in using prayer as an excuse for inaction. Some people will pray about something for years when in reality, God has already told them what to do. Take Moses, for example. When he stood before the Red Sea, trapped between Pharaoh's army and the water, he cried out to God. But what did God say? "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." Exodus 14:15. There comes a time when we must stop praying about something and start acting on it. Faith is not passive, it is active. Praying for healing? Take steps toward better health. Praying for wisdom? Start reading, studying, and learning. Praying for restored relationships? Make the first move toward reconciliation. God opens doors, but we have to walk through them. However, there's something else that can hinder our prayers, our own words. Sometimes, the greatest obstacle to answered prayer isn't what we do, but what we say. And that's what we'll explore next. The power of our words and why complaining and negativity can block the very blessings we're praying for. One of the biggest mistakes people make after praying is using their words to cancel out their faith. They pray for breakthrough, but then complain about their situation. They ask God for provision, but speak words of lack. They seek healing, but constantly declare their sickness. What many don't realize is that words have power. What you speak can either align with God's promises or work against them. Proverbs 18:21 warns us, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." If we want to see the answers to our prayers, we must be mindful of the words we release. Think about the Israelites. God had already promised them the land of Canaan, yet they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Why? Because of their constant complaining. Numbers 14:27-28 records God's response to their grumbling. "How long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing I heard you say." Their negative words shaped their reality. Instead of stepping into the promise, they spoke doubt and fear, and they received exactly what they declared. This mistake still happens today. Someone prays for a financial breakthrough but constantly says, "I'll never get out of debt." Another prays for a godly spouse but keeps saying, "There are no good men, women out there." Or a person asks God for peace but fills their conversations with worry, stress, and anxiety. Words create atmosphere, and if we fill our environment with negativity, it becomes difficult for faith to thrive. Jesus emphasized this truth in Mark 11:23. "Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them." Notice that he didn't say to think about the mountain moving, he said to speak to it. Faith is activated not just through belief, but through declaration. Complaining and negativity, on the other hand, do the opposite. They reinforce the problem instead of the promise. So how do we correct this mistake? First, we need to guard our tongues. Before speaking, ask, "Does this align with what I prayed for?" If not, don't say it. Second, replace negativity with gratitude. Instead of complaining about what hasn't happened yet, thank God for what He's already done. Philippians 4:6 tells us, "Do not be anxious about anything, But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Thankfulness keeps faith alive. But speaking negatively isn't the only mistake. Another common error is comparing our situation to others. Sometimes, the biggest enemy of faith is looking at someone else's journey instead of trusting God's timing for our own. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. One of the quickest ways to lose faith after praying is to start comparing your life to others. You've prayed for a breakthrough, but then you see someone else receiving theirs first. You've asked God for healing, but someone else testifies about their miracle while you're still waiting. You've been believing for a financial blessing, but your friend suddenly gets a promotion while your situation remains unchanged. In these moments, it's easy to question, why them and not me? Did God forget about me? But comparison is a trap that leads to frustration, jealousy, and even doubt in God's timing. The Bible warns us against comparison. 2 Corinthians 10:12 says, "We do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise." Why? Because comparison distorts our faith. Instead of focusing on what God is doing in our lives, we get distracted by what He's doing for others. It shifts our attention from God's faithfulness to our own feelings of inadequacy. One of the greatest examples of the dangers of comparison is found in John 21:21-22. After Jesus had risen from the dead, He was speaking to Peter about his future. But instead of focusing on what Jesus was telling him, Peter turned, saw John, and asked, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus responded, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." In other words, stop worrying about someone else's journey, focus on yours. Comparison also breeds discontentment. When we measure our progress against others, we often fail to appreciate what God is doing in our own lives. But Philippians 4:11-12 teaches us the power of contentment. "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation." Trusting God means believing that His timing is perfect for you, even if someone else receives their answer first. So how do we overcome this trap? First, we shift our focus back to God. Instead of asking, "Why them and not me?" we should ask, "God, what are you teaching me in this season?" Second, we celebrate others' blessings. Rejoicing in someone else's success does not delay ours, it actually positions us for greater things. Romans 12:15 instructs us, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn." When we genuinely celebrate others, we open our hearts for God to work in our own lives. But there's one more mistake that can delay answers to prayer: giving up too soon. Sometimes, the breakthrough is just around the corner, but people quit praying before it comes. And that's what we'll explore next: the importance of persistence in prayer. One of the biggest mistakes people make after praying is giving up too soon. They pray for a while, but when they don't see immediate results, they assume God isn't listening or that His answer is no. But the Bible makes it clear persistent prayer is powerful. Breakthroughs don't always come instantly. Sometimes God is working behind the scenes, testing our faith, or preparing us for what we've asked for. The real question is, will you keep praying even when you don't see results right away? Jesus Himself emphasized the importance of persistence in prayer. In Luke 18:1-8, He told the parable of the persistent widow, a woman who repeatedly went to a judge seeking justice. The judge initially ignored her, but because she kept coming back, he eventually granted her request. Jesus then said, "And will not God bring about justice for His chosen ones, who cry out to Him day and night? Will He keep putting them off?" This passage teaches us that God honors perseverance. He wants us to keep praying, keep believing, and keep trusting Him. But why does God sometimes delay His answers? One reason is that persistence builds faith. If God answered every prayer instantly, we wouldn't develop the endurance to trust Him in difficult seasons. James 1:3-4 tells us, The testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Delayed answers refine us. They teach us patience, humility, and reliance on God rather than on our own understanding. Another reason people stop praying is because they misinterpret silence as rejection. Just because God hasn't answered yet doesn't mean He won't. Daniel 10:12-13 shows how Daniel's prayer was heard the moment he prayed, but the answer was delayed due to spiritual warfare. There are things happening in the unseen realm that we don't always understand. But one thing is certain: giving up will never bring the answer. So how can we remain steadfast in prayer? First, set a habit of consistent communication with God. Don't just pray when you need something. Build a relationship with Him. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 instructs us, pray continually. Prayer is not just an emergency button. It's a lifestyle. Second, when doubt creeps in, remind yourself of God's past faithfulness. If He has answered before, He will do it again. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep expecting. Prayer is not just about making requests, it's about transformation. The longer we pray, the more we align our hearts with God's will. And sometimes, what changes the most in the waiting season is us. So don't give up. Keep pressing in, because the breakthrough might be closer than you think. Now that we've explored the 5 biggest mistakes people make after praying, it's time for some reflection. Have you unknowingly made one of these mistakes? Have you doubted God's answer, failed to take action, spoken negativity, compared your life to others, or given up too soon? If so, don't worry, because the good news is that it's not too late to change. The Bible reminds us that God is faithful. He hears every prayer, and His timing is always perfect. But our role is to stay in faith, take action, speak life, trust His plan, and keep praying even when we don't see results immediately. Galatians 6-9 encourage us, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Your breakthrough could be just around the corner. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 mistakes do you think is the most common? Have you ever experienced a delay in your prayers and later realized it was because of one of these reasons? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful biblical teaching that could strengthen your faith. If this message helped you, share it with a friend who might need this encouragement today. If you want to go deeper into this topic, check out the next video appearing on your screen right now. It could be exactly what you need to hear next. Thank you for being here today. Stay strong in faith, trust God's process, and remember, your answered prayer might be closer than you think. See you in the next video.